So I thought for today's meeting, we could discuss the nature of anxiety. Anxiety, while it's always been something of concern, there's a great deal of talk around the topic in our modern world. And I thought by our reflecting to our discussion here today, the nature of anxiety, we could examine our relationship to it. Specifically as practitioners on a personal level and on what it means for us. Anxiety seems to be a byproduct of what it means to be human. Anxiety seems to be an intrinsic part of what it means to be a human being. We live in a world where there's a great emphasis on our having things under control, in order, managed. We can think about this in terms of our social living and the structures which are in place to provide a sense of order and sophistication, where people are able to engage in different services and interact one with the other in a way which is somewhat coherent, orderly. And so, as participants in such a society, there's an expectation within us that things will move in accord with these structures. But quite often they don't. Quite often, individuals, other people, step outside the parameters of what's acceptable. And at times we probably do so ourselves. And so while the structures are there for things to flow smoothly, they don't necessarily mean that things always do flow smoothly. And so this idea of having a social structure which is orderly and managed is something that we can have in our imagination as a possibility. But in reality, things can be quite different. And then in response to this, we may find ourselves reacting in different ways at different times. But if we zoom in a little to our own lives and look at how the idea of having control, order, and management over our own lives is something which is emphasized a great deal, especially in our modern era. The idea of having everything in line, where you're living your best version of yourself, where your day is jam-packed with all the ideal activities which will allow for your full expression, that you're waking at the right time after the ideal amount of sleep, that you're eating the right foods in the right portion, that you engage in activities in a manner which is effective and efficient, doing the things that bring you joy, that you stop at the right time to eat for lunch, eat again, eating the right foods in the right proportions, but that in your day you also include time for exercise, for recreation, for social engagement, all the while doing everything you can to ensure that your financial situation is tip top, that your romance life is going well, and so that every aspect of your own personal life is monitored, managed, and functioning at an optimum level. And this is something which is pushed a great deal nowadays. This sense of having absolute control over your person. So, with all this certainty being advocated on a social level, but also at a personal level, when things don't go according to plan, when we're met face to face with uncertainty, how do we tolerate this? What's our response to it? We use the term stress, but we also use the term anxiety. So anxiety is pointing towards some kind of internal disturbance, which is in a direct response to the uncertainty of the world we live in, and the uncertainty which is brought about by our relationship to ourselves. As human beings, we don't always perform according to our own imagined version of how we should be performing. And so there's a disconnect between the imagined certainty we have of ourselves and the experienced uncertainty which we're confronted with almost on a daily basis when we act and respond to life and situations in ways which is not in accord with how we'd like them to be. And so what we're getting at here is the very nature of our lived experience as being full of uncertainties. And in a world where certainty, control, management, order is expounded as being the optimum reality, as being the way things should be, and in some cases the way things are, to come head to head, face to face with uncertainty, we're left in a position which can feel jarring, uncomfortable. So, built into our experience as human beings is this confrontation between the idea of certainty and the reality of uncertainty. And then if we add to that, that as individuals we are faced with choices as we navigate through our day-to-day experiences. choices from the moment we wake up in the morning all through the day until we go to bed at night. So for breakfast, what do we eat? Which bus should we get? Or should we drive? What should we say to the manager? What approach should we take on talking to them about the project that we're working on? Should we say this? Should we say that? How do we open up to our partner about how we're feeling? Or should we open up to them? If we do, maybe we shouldn't say everything. Maybe we should hold back on some things. All these possibilities. And we are having to make decisions in terms of each one of them at every instance. And it doesn't give up. Every new day brings a whole myriad of new decisions. And these are the decisions we make in the moments of our day-to-day lives. But they're the decisions that we make which can affect how we experience life itself. Should we move our career in this direction or that direction? Should we buy a property? Should we sell the car? Should we ask that person to marry us? Should we break up? And so there's these moments in our lives when we have to make decisions which alter the trajectory of our lives itself. And so with all this possibility, all this potential built into every decision, where the variables at play can overwhelm us in terms of how things can go, it can feel very daunting to make a decision and to act in it. Because we're always left with the sense of, did I do the right thing? Did I make the right choice? And in terms of our mundane decisions, we may put strawberry jam on our bread. And while we're eating it, we may wonder, should I have had honey? What would have happened if I didn't have any sweetener on my toast today or on my bread today? In terms of our lives, we can be working in a certain position and every day wonder, well, what if? What if I hadn't studied accounting? What if I had chosen something else? Or what if I hadn't studied in that university? Or what if I hadn't taken that position as my first job? And so, with all the decisions we make, both on a day-to-day level and in terms of our lives, we're always going to be left with what if? And the reality of the situation is that there's no right answer. Nobody can come to us and tell us, this is what you should do. This is the right thing for you to do. Because ultimately it falls back on us. Because we're the ones who have to experience it. We're the ones who have to follow up on it. The consequences of our choices, which lead to other decisions being made, is all on us. And so there's a great deal of uncertainty built into being alive as a human being. A great deal of uncertainty about being alive as a human being functioning within our socialized societies. And so this can create an effect in us of discomfort, unrest, an agitation, a restlessness, which is ungrounding. It leaves us feeling disconnected, unsettled. This restlessness moves within us. Where our sense of where we are and what we're at can become diluted, wishy-washy. So this ungrounded restlessness leads to our looking for ways to anchor ourselves down, to get a sense of being in control, being in command. That this agitation, which is vibrating continuously within us, sometimes not always at a gross level, but sometimes at a subtle level, it's agitating within us. It causes us to look outwards for ways to find stability. And so we latch on to one thing here or one thing there. And we distract ourselves. We distract ourselves from the experience of it by focusing and giving our attention to the things that are around us. They may be things which have no real benefit for us and don't really give us much fulfillment or meaning. But they allow us to center ourselves by distracting us away from this agitation which is taking place within us. And so what are these things that we distract ourselves with? Well, they are the things of life. Everything. For some, it might be a sport, an exercise routine. It might be work, maybe TV. Some of the things may in themselves not bring about any harm. They may not necessarily be useful, but they may not be harmful either. For some unfortunate individuals, the thing that they latch on to can be harmful. Where, in the case of substances, it can end up having control over them at a biophysical level. But just because they're not harmful, or just because they're not necessarily useless, we can't ignore the role that they're playing, which is to distract us from the experience that we're having as human beings. That confrontation with uncertainty. Now, when we look at our lives, it could be the case that we invest ourselves to a certain activity, a role, a position, or we may invest ourselves in a certain belief system, giving ourselves to it. And we may do this for decades, where we commit ourselves to an activity or a role, a position, or a belief system for many years on end. But then at some point, the function that this activity or role has served for us begins to wane. It no longer serves the restlessness that it has been keeping at bay, the agitation, the anxiety, as we might call it, begins to come through it. Cracks begin to form and the anxiety begins to seep through. Forcing us once again to look at the reality of our situation. Now, one of these activities that we can identify with as a way of anchoring ourselves, distracting ourselves from this ungrounded restlessness, is the practice of meditation itself. Because meditation, if we are to define it, means effortless concentration. So, in order for us to be able to experience that state, we have to develop our capacity to concentrate, to pay attention to the point where it becomes effortless. And so, we're given techniques, we're given approaches, certain processes that we can follow. But these processes, these approaches, these techniques, concentration techniques, have the potential to be something that we can latch onto, to remove our having to deal with restlessness. Now, a lot more can be said around this, but suffice to say that our reasons for engaging in meditation, while they may initially be to give ourselves something that we can identify with so that we don't have to confront the reality of the human condition, that inner restlessness. While this might be our motivation, with time, we will have to acknowledge that there is an onus on us as practitioners to face the reality of it. And I can say a little bit more about that as we continue. So essentially, we as individuals have been influenced by our upbringing, by our cultures, our surroundings. And so the things that we use as a way of distracting ourselves are determined by these to a certain degree. Meaning that the decisions you make as a means for you to uh, navigate your way may not be entirely from a position of clear understanding. The choice to become an accountant, the choice to take up running, the choice to engage in a certain belief system, can be brought about as a consequence of what we see others doing, what is being told to us, what's popular, what is appreciated and encouraged within our family constellation, what our parents have done, what our siblings have done. And so we may naturally find ourselves making decisions based on that. And so these outer determiners can provide us with a whole selection of different things that we can use to distract our attention, where we can channel the restlessness. But they're not what we have found for ourselves. They have been given to us. So I was mentioning that yoga as a discipline, or indeed any spiritual tradition, which is offering a means for an individual to gain understanding into the human condition and their experience of living and of who they are. Can be attractive. Now, it can be attractive for many reasons, and some of those reasons may be external determiners, such as family, friends, what's popular, these things. But they can also be internal determiners, a desire to get our heads around what's going on, to know a bit more of who we are, how we function. So as we engage in the practices which are offered, we'll find ourselves moving towards the truth. Now, the aim of the practice, specifically within yoga, is to neutralize the effect of everything which prevents us from experiencing reality as it is. So what does that mean? That means that when we engage in yoga practice, when we engage in contemplative practices, we are inviting that which we were trying to remove ourselves from. And that is the restlessness, that agitation which ungrounds us. And so in our efforts to find something which can solve that issue, the discomfort of that uncertainty, in our efforts to do that, we come to the path of yoga. And yoga outlines a series of principles and practices which call into question how we identify with different things. And as we work through all of this, we start to actively create cracks. cracks in the constructed sense of self that we've created, where the things that we have identified with as a means to pacify this vibrant uncertainty within us and the effects of it, where these things no longer serve in the same way. And for practitioners who are committed, this point of arrival, when the thing that they've been trying to escape is coming more and more present, it creates a certain crisis for them. Because within our practice, we're endeavoring to allow ourselves to experience what is real. And in Kriya we have 3 pillars. The first is tapas, or self-discipline, which is encouraging us to withstand this agitation, to withstand the uncertainty, to withstand it, not try to escape it. The second pillar, self-inquiry, is urging us to look at how we have used different things, latched onto them and identified with them as a way to create a sense of a whole self, which is solid, certain, secure. But how all of these identifications are all a means to cover up our inner self. And the third pillar is Ishvara Pranidhana, which is surrendering to absolute reality. And so this is the aim of the practice of yoga, to be able to move towards surrendering ourselves to absolute reality. So then the nature of absolute reality is brought to our door. And this reality is defined as being unbound, unconditioned, infinite possibility, infinite potential. And with that type of description, we get a sense of the magnificence of it. But it has the capacity to express in so many ways. Some of these may be terrific, horrific, or beautiful and amazing. But it's this potency, this unbound, undefined, infinite potential, which we come face to face with. It cannot be anchored down. It cannot be categorized. And so, certainty is elusive. So So in our practice, we're aiming to surrender ourselves to this, which means that we have to look at the nature of the self, look at how it has been established through identifications with different things which have helped to avoid having to come face to face with this infinite potential. And then tapas, self-discipline, urges us to stay strong, to stand our ground, despite the challenge in it, despite the intensity of it. As we come to terms with this raw potency within us as being our essential nature. Come to terms with the fact that we do not know. And outcomes can be both horrific and beautiful. And so our whole practice, and we can say that the whole human condition is one where we're invited to understand and appreciate that while we make efforts to escape this potency, to escape the vibrancy of it, the unsettling nature of it, while we make and take actions which are attempts to avoid this, we are preventing ourselves from being able to appreciate absolute reality. And as we lean more towards accepting that anxiety is an intrinsic part of what it means to be alive, because anxiety is a reflection of the unbound, infinite potential of life itself. We can then work through the things which prevent us from being able to work with it, where instead of just jumping on things as an attempt to alleviate this discomfort, instead we can channel it, direct it, so that we are living in a manner where our choice, our decision on what to do, despite all the uncertainties that go with it, despite all the what ifs which surround it, our choice and our decision satisfies us. It aligns with our heart's desire. And with every day and every passing moment of our lives, we know that we are living in truth. And so that potential which is expressing through us, that infinite potential of life itself, as daunting as it can be at times, as we commit ourselves to engaging in life in a certain way, we're confident that we are expressing that potential in a manner which is aligned to our own innermost self, and which we can say is an act of surrender to absolute reality, which is able to express through us freely, without inhibition, and with confidence. So, living then in this manner, we may not become rich, we may not experience perfect health, we may come up against challenges, but our sense of self and our sense of alignment to reality in its absolute form oozes from within us. We live life with vigor, with confidence. We live a life which is deeply fulfilling because we are living our lives truly. So, this talk is offered to provoke reflection on the nature of anxiety.